Hi, I'm Farmer Sara and welcome to Wiker Acres. Today in my kitchen we are going to do biscuits and gravy, and then we're also going to make some homemade noodles with our pork dumpling sausage. So, all about comfort food today, that's for sure. My recipes will be on the Wiker Acres Facebook page. I just hand write them. I will take a photo of it, post it on the page. If you have any questions, you can let me know. So I'm going to get started with the biscuit recipe. Now this recipe I have been using for years. Matter of fact, it's from a cookbook from the home that I grew up in. My dad always made biscuits. And what I like about this biscuit recipe is it's very versatile. So it also has little notes on you can make buttermilk biscuits. You can make cornmeal, you can make sour cream, you can make cheese and chives, or like me, my favorite, I grew up in Grand Rapids and we had a Hardee's in Grand Rapids. I don't know if any of you remember the biscuits that had the raisins and the cinnamon and that lovely super sweet glaze on it. We're actually going to make those today too. So I have that all down on the recipe. This recipe calls for either lard or butter, but today we are going to cook with lard, of course. If any of you gotten our pork boxes in the past and you want another idea of what you can use your lard for, well, biscuits is a great thing for lard. All right, so first thing you're going to do is preheat your oven to 450 degrees. Biscuits really work well if you handle them very little and then pop them into a nice hot oven to give that lard a chance to create some air pockets, and that will give you a nice fluffy biscuit. So we're going to get started. Oh, also, today I'm going to make the biscuits gluten-free. This is the flour that I use. It's more expensive, but I really do prefer this flour. I have used Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1, but it really didn't stay together like this one does. So if any of you have a favorite gluten-free flour brand, pop it in the comments. I'd love to know what you use, but today we're going to use this. Also, on a side note, make sure that you do have fresh baking powder. Pardon me. That will make your biscuits nice and light and fluffy. I like to use a baking powder that has no aluminum in it. If you are not a big baker, hopefully I will change that. You can always buy it in bulk and just buy a small amount of a time. You really don't want your baking powder to be over expired. Okay, so let's follow the recipe here. 2 cups of gluten-free flour. We are going to do some baking powder, sugar, cream of tartar, and salt. Again, it's all on the recipe. And then we are just going to stir that together. Now today I'm going to use my God, that word just like totally, food processor, thank you. I'm going to use the food processor today for something a little different. Normally I just use a pastry blender. And we're going to try and get this in here without me getting flour all over the place. A big success. And then we have our 1/2 cup of lard. So we're going to add that to the food processor. If your lard is nice and cold, that is a bonus. All right, here we go. I'm going to put it on high for a few minutes. And this is probably why I don't really use this, because it's taking a long time. So we're going to scrap this because it's not really working. And I'm just going to use my pastry blender like I always do. Just goes to show I probably shouldn't try something new when it already works. All right, so we are going to mix all of this together. Now, when we go to make the gravy, today I'm going to make a meatless gravy, but know that you can use any any of our pork products. Like you can just do plain ground pork in your gravy. You can do wild rice. You can do chorizo. You can do hot Italian. Hot Italian would probably be my favorite for the biscuits and gravy. We're going to want to keep mixing this until the flour and the lard are mixed together in like pea-sized shapes. Now, when I go to make the gravy, I did save some bacon grease because I like to bake our bacon sometimes. And then that's a really great way to collect some of the grease. So that's what I'll be using for the gravy today. All right, so that looks great. Nice chunks, all the lard is mixed in with the flour. Now, the recipe calls for 2/3 cup of milk. We have no milk. We have half and half. So this is going to make the biscuits taste even better. So we're going to put in the milk. And then we're just going to stir. Now, because I'm using lard, the lard melts very quickly when your hand touches the lard. That's why I'm using a spoon. And when it gets really nice and mixed, I'll use my hands. As you can see, it's still a little sticky. So always have a bowl of flour handy for times like this. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on it to make it a little bit more stiff. With trying not to handle it as much as you can. Add some more flour. Now I'm going to just make these right on my countertop. So again, you want to put some flour down on your countertop. I promise it's clean. Now, if you want thinner biscuits, you can have it thin. If you want it thicker, then like this right now is about 3/4 of an inch thick. And then I just have a cutter, and I'm going to take my biscuits and set them on a pan. I do like to use parchment paper. I really don't know why it works so well, but I think it helps maybe even out the baking process, but it really does make for nice, evenly cooked items, and plus the cleanup is nice. Now I am using a little bit thicker biscuits. The recipe does say that it will make 10. I rarely get 10 out of it because, like I said, I like my biscuits a little thicker. I'm actually going to get 6 biscuits out of this recipe. And then of course there's always that last biscuit. We kind of call it the ugly biscuit. Because it's kind of all the leftover pieces. So you can just roll it in a bowl and put it on your pan. So here's all the biscuits. So we're going to put them in the oven at 450 degrees from anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes. I always time it at 11 and then I check on them. Now, I made biscuits earlier this morning, and here is the final product that we will put the gravy on. They're nice and light, and they're just a little bit golden brown. Now, like I said earlier, you can make biscuits with various different variations. That didn't make any sense. Anyway, I made some cinnamon raisin biscuits. As you can see, there's lots of lovely raisins in there, and I did add a little bit extra sugar to the flour just to sweeten them up a little bit. We are going to just clean up the mess here. Now I'm going to turn on my hot pad because we're going to get started on the gravy. And then I'm just going to clean up a few of the dishes here. Set these aside. Wipe off my hands while the hot plate warms up. So like I was saying earlier, you can use any kind of our pork products, or like today, we're just going to not add any pork, we're just going to make plain gravy. Now, the trick with the gravy is your roux. Your roux can either consist of flour, or you can use a starch, a potato starch or a corn starch. Today, we're going to actually use flour. So, on the gravy, we will use chicken broth today. So, I'm going to go ahead and, oops, no, we're not going to do the chicken broth yet. First, we're going to do the butter. I've got some local butter here. It calls for 2 tablespoons. And I don't really get terribly picky about exact quantities because butter is lovely. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of melt that butter. And I have it on like a medium heat here because I don't want to burn my butter, but I do want it to get a little bit of brown. Now, while we're waiting for the butter to melt, we are going to do our roux, which is the flour and some milk. I ran out of the half and half, so we're going to actually use a little bit of whipping cream, which is going to make it really good. And I'm going to start out with like about a tablespoon of whipping cream. And we want it to be pretty liquidy. I guess this is taking way more milk than I anticipated, or maybe because it's so thick. So here is a really great example. So I'm improvising here because I had to use whipping cream instead of milk, which is making my roux really thick. So I'm actually going to add some of my broth to it because if I don't want too much milk in it, oh, see, now that's working out much better. It's making the roux a little bit more liquidy. And of course, the trick to not having, you see how the butter is nice and brown, to not having lumpy gravy is you want this roux part to be as smooth as possible. So I'm kind of trying to get all of the lumps and bumps out of here. I'm going to turn my butter down. Okay. I'm going to actually grab a whisk. I'm having a hard time getting some of these lumps out. So we will see how this gravy turns out. So I'm going to add the roux to the butter. And then I'm going to constantly stir it. And then I'm going to add my chicken broth, or any kind of broth you want, vegetable broth, chicken broth, beef broth, whatever you want. And then we're just going to kind of keep on mixing. Now, earlier I said I had saved some bacon grease. So here is some bacon grease. It's even got like some little bits of bacon in it, which will make it taste nice and good. And then I'm going to add that to my gravy. Now I have to turn the heat up a little bit because the idea is we want it to kind of boil. while constantly stirring. You can see it's a nice color. I'm going to turn it up a little bit and get rid of these dishes. Now, biscuits and gravy is a great dinner. And you know, if you make a whole bunch of biscuits and you don't want to just make biscuits and gravy, they make great egg sandwiches. Slice them in half and they make great little tiny pizzas. Good peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I'm definitely not a meat cook. I usually make a mess. So you probably can't see this, but I can feel it when I'm whisking. It's starting to get a little thicker. So I'm going to add some little bit of sea salt. This one is actually Applewood smoked. I'm going to add some of that in there. Then I'm going to add a little bit of pepper. Don't need much seasoning because I do have bacon grease in there. But it kind of gives us this nice speckled look. You can add any spices you want. You can add, if you're going to use ground or plain ground pork, you know, add some garlic or add some basil. Ooh, it's thickening up very nicely here. Now, it will thicken up a little bit once you stop cooking it, so you kind of want it on a little bit of the thin side before you stop. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. And here are our biscuits. And see that nice gravy? Look at that. Oh, it smells so good. And any leftover gravy that you have, you can put it in a glass container and let it cool, obviously, and store it in the refrigerator. It's great for pasties. Gravy's so good. So there is biscuits and gravy. Now we're going to get to the dessert part of biscuits and gravy. Josie will be excited. He likes it when I do these cooking shows because then he gets to eat all the extra food. Now, with the cinnamon raisin biscuits, to make the frosting, all you need is some powdered sugar. There's, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of a cup of powdered sugar. And back to my whipping cream, or you could use milk, hemp milk, coconut milk, half and half, whatever you have, just not water. It has to be some sort of a, you know, like a thicker product. And we're just going to add a little bit at a time until it's the desired thickness. And we want it kind of runny enough to pour over top of the biscuits. But not too runny. And I like to make this in a glass jar. This is an old jelly jar because I'll put a lid on it of what I don't use, and it's good on pancakes. It's just, oh, it's so good. All right, so we're just going to pour some of this over top of the biscuits. You can put as little or as much as you want. Of course, I like a lot. And then put a lid on this, and you can store this in the fridge. And there you have cinnamon and raisin biscuits. Now, I kind of improvise also on this recipe because I don't have any raisins in the house. But I do have, and I get these from the Cloquet Natural Food Store, which has curbside pickup, by the way, in Cloquet. These are dried cherries soaked in apple juice, and they're really good. So this is actually what's in the cinnamon and raisin biscuits. So nice little treat. And if you want, you can sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon over top of your biscuits, and I can guarantee you that whoever you serve them to will appreciate this nice sweet treat. So those are biscuits and gravy. See how quick that was? Yeah, people seem to think that baking takes a long time, but as long as you're organized, I cooked biscuits in 20 minutes. So now we're going to do noodles. Now, to get a little head start, I'm going to get our broth going, because when we make our noodles, we're going to cook them in a broth, and that's what's going to firm them up. So I just have chicken broth here, and it's 8 cups. And I'm going to get this going warm so it doesn't waste time. And I just use a liquid broth. You can get this at the co-op. It comes in chicken, veggie, or beef. You keep it in the refrigerator. This 8 cups of water took a couple of tablespoons, and it works really slick. And while we're waiting for this to cook, I'm going to actually add something to this, because I do like my bowl of noodles to have some color, so I'm going to add some red pepper. This is just some chopped red pepper. There we go. And then we're going to add some seasoning. I'm going to add some cumin, some chives, a little bit of black pepper, and then we're going to stir. Now, White Acres butcher Brian Merkel and Chef Hans put together this fabulous pork sausage. It is called pork dumpling sausage. This is a frozen package, and this is what I'm using today for this recipe. You can use any other kind of pork. I like to make little meatballs, so you can use ground pork. You can use, again, wild rice, hot Italian, chorizo, whatever you want. You could cut up Polishes. That also works great. Or you can cut up brats. Any kind of meat works. But for today's recipe, I used the pork dumpling sausage, and I made some meatballs, and I cooked these at like, I think 375 for like a half an hour. Yeah, 375 for like a half an hour, or you can do 350 for a little bit longer. I like mine like nice and brown and firm, so that's why I cook them at a little bit higher temperature for a little longer. And then we are going to make the noodles. All right, now again, this recipe will be on the White Acres page. And today I am going to make some gluten-free noodles. Since we're going to be rolling these out, because I'm actually going to make noodles, but I will show you how you can just use them as drop dumplings. I'm going to use my lefse board. Makes things a little bit neater. So the recipe calls for 2½ cups of flour, 2 eggs, salt, baking powder, and some milk, which is really half and half. Okay. Yeah, okay, so we're just going to add the salt and baking powder. And, oh, I lost my whisk. Where's my whisk? We're going to mix that up before we add the eggs and the milk. And I actually am going to need a bigger bowl. So I'm going to transfer this flour to a bigger bowl. This looks kind of sloppy. All right. My chickens have been laying so many eggs. And as you can see, look at those gorgeous yolks. Oh, I just feel so spoiled. Some of my chickens are like 6 years old and they are still laying, which I'm just so grateful for. So eggs and milk. And then we're just going to combine this. And it's going to be kind of a sticky dough, and that's okay. It wasn't actually really very smart of me to use this really small whisk because now everything is stuck in there. So I'm just going to resort to mixing with my hands because that's usually what I do. What I like when I get to use our eggs from our chickens, it makes just this really nice yellow color. Okay. So here is the dough. Now, at this point, if you were going to do drop dumplings, I would not add any flour to this. This is perfect. The stickier, the better. And you just take a teaspoon, and then when your water is boiling, you would drop these, the chicken broth. You would drop these right in the broth, and it'll puff right up, and they'll be just super good. So remember, they will puff up. So if you are going to drop a small amount, you see that in there? It's going to puff up twice the size. All right, so I am really sticky. Luckily, I have tons of towels. And then I am going to add a little bit of flour because I am going to roll these out into noodles. Oh, perfect. Now, the noodles have a tendency to make the chicken broth a little bit thicker. So, running out of time here, unfortunately. So we're just going to roll this out. And then you want to take a knife. And this is where you would cut your strips. Now, I would definitely make this thinner, but we are running out of time. So I'm going to turn this up so they can start boiling, and I'm just going to do little square dumplings. Actually, I'm going to make them round. And you kind of want to drop them in like at around 10 at a time because they'll really make your broth froth up. So I'm just going to keep doing this. Now I have made this recipe and I have served it over sweet potatoes, which is really good. You can roast cabbage and serve it over cabbage. You can serve it over roasted carrots and potatoes. Like, it would be good with any vegetable. Or you can just eat it like it is. All right, my water is not boiling. Matt's grandma, Berna Wyke, used to make, when he was in college at UND, would make him a big bowl of this, but she just basically would do the noodles and the gravy. And he said, like, literally a big bowl of it, and that's all Matt would live on for a couple days. So this is really a fun comfort food for Matt. This also tastes really good cold. And if any of you guys have any ideas for what you would like to see next on the show, since we've covered pies, we've covered pasties. Okay. So my broth is finally starting to boil. So I'm going to just go ahead and start dropping some in. I'm going to actually move this over if I can. It won't be too hot so you guys can see a little better. So they are kind of puffing up. So keep dropping them in as long as they're not really sticking together. If you're worried about them sticking together, you can just gently stir them. I'm just going to keep on going. I don't know if you can hear the chickens outside. I'm going to do a little bit more stirring so they don't stick together. Ooh, it's looking good. The red pepper adds a really nice color to the broth. I'm going to make this do a... All right. We're going to get this out of the way. I'm going to keep wiping my hands off. I am going to just test the broth and make sure that I have enough salt and pepper and spices to it. Oh, yum, it's perfect. Perfect, perfect. So, you can serve this kind of family style, or you can do it individually. So I'm going to put a couple of my meatballs here. And then I'm going to have sprouts from Tiny Farm ready to go when this is all nice and boiled. And it's already starting to thicken up from the extra flour in the noodles. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture of the final product because I am out of time, and show you what the final product looked like. But I can assure you, this is really good. It's just a nice dumpling comfort food. Like I said, you can serve it over roasted vegetables. You can serve it on its own. You can top it with some sprouts. You can add some kale or spinach to it. It's a very, very yummy meal. I hope you enjoyed today's cooking show, and thank you so much for joining me. And until next time,